My life had turned into a living hell, all thanks to the frat house next door. For months, I put up with the endless parties, music so loud my pictures rattled on the walls, and a general attitude that no one else in the world existed. I tried talking to them. I complained to the landlord. I did everything you're supposed to do, but nothing worked. It actually made them worse, like my begging for a little quiet was some kind of joke. Then I found a small metal fuse box on the side of their apartment. It was the key to my salvation, and I decided I would wait for the absolute perfect moment to flip a single switch, shut down their world, and finally get the ultimate revenge and my peace and quiet back. Moving to Hawaii was supposed to be a dream come true. ID found what I thought was the perfect little duplex for me and my toddler. It wasn't too fancy, but it was ours. The air was warm, you could smell flowers everywhere, and the peaceful life I wanted felt so close. The walls were paper thin, which is pretty common in older island homes built to let the breeze through. But the other side of the duplex was empty. For 3 perfect months, it was everything ID hoped for. I had a little yard, my daughter had a safe place to play, and the nights were quiet. But that blissful silence had an expiration date I didn't know about. Then they showed up. A moving truck, a beat-up pickup, and what felt like an entire fraternity of guys in their early 20s. My heart just sank. I try not to judge, but the sheer number of them, the shouting and laughing, and the music blasting from the truck, it was a vibe, and it was not a good one. It felt like they were colonizing the space right next to my daughter's bedroom. I told myself to stay positive. They're just excited, I thought. Give them a chance to settle in. That first weekend was the test, and they failed. Hard. The music started around 8 p.m. on Friday. And it wasn't just music. It was this deep, pounding bass that vibrated right through the walls and into my bones. It felt like a physical thing. Then came the screaming, the whooping, and the unmistakable thump splash of a beer pong game. My daughter, who normally sleeps through anything, kept waking up, terrified by the sudden yelling. I remember rocking her back to sleep, just vibrating with anger, praying they would stop. They didn't. It went on until 3 a.m. The next day, I was a zombie, but I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt. Housewarming party, right? Annoying, but okay. Then Saturday night was an exact repeat. Sunday was only a little quieter. I was quickly realizing that the thin walls of my dream home were a huge mistake. I could hear everything. Not just their music, I could hear the lyrics. I didn't just hear talking, I heard entire conversations. I knew who was hooking up, who was failing classes, and who could chug a beer the fastest. They weren't just neighbors. They were the stars of a 24/7 reality show that was ruining my life. For the first few weeks, I tried to be the cool neighbor. I was young once, I get it. So when the noise on a Tuesday night got so loud that my windows were rattling, I decided to just be friendly about it. I took a deep breath, walked over, and knocked. The door opened, and a wave of heat, stale beer, and rap music hit me. A guy with a backwards cap just stared at me, confused, like he couldn't imagine why anyone would be at his door. "Hey," I said, trying to smile. "I'm your neighbor. Would you guys mind turning the music down just a little? My daughter's trying to sleep." He gave me a lazy, "Oh, yeah, sure, no problem," and shut the door. And for about 15 glorious minutes, it was quieter. I actually felt relieved. See? You just have to communicate. But that feeling didn't last. Slowly, like he was turning it up one notch at a time, the volume started creeping back up. Within half an hour, it was just as loud as before. It felt personal. It felt like they were saying, "We heard you and we do not care." My next move was a note. I thought maybe something written down would be less confrontational. I wrote the politest, most carefully worded message I could. "Hi, neighbors. Just a friendly reminder that the walls are very thin. I'd be so grateful if you could keep it down after 10 p.m. on weeknights. Thanks so much." I taped it to their door and ran away, feeling like a coward but hoping it would work. That night, the party started at 10:05 p.m. It was louder than ever. I had basically just sent them a party invitation. That S when I got the landlord involved. This had to be against the lease. I sent a long email detailing the constant noise and my attempts to fix it. The landlord's response was a generic, "I'll send them a warning." I'm sure he did, but that piece of paper meant nothing to them. The noise just kept going. I called the landlord again and again. Each time he sounded more annoyed with me than with them. He'd say things like, "They're college kids, what do you expect?" Or, "Just call the cops if it's so bad." So, I did. I called the non emergency line. A police car would show up, the music would go quiet for the 10 minutes they were there, and then it would roar back to life the second their car was out of sight. It became a game for them. They knew nothing would happen. The situation got worse. The smell of weed started seeping through the walls into my daughter's room. Random cars were showing up at all hours. It didn't just feel annoying anymore, it was starting to feel unsafe. They were a hurricane of entitlement, and I was trapped right in the middle of it. My breaking point came on a Wednesday. Not a party night, it was a video game. But they had the sound turned up so loud that the explosions from their game were making my daughter cry. It was 1 a.m. She had just fallen asleep, and a huge virtual boom had jolted her awake, screaming. As I sat on the floor of her room, rocking her, I was shaking with a mix of exhaustion and pure rage. I was paying to live in this nightmare. The next morning, running on anger and caffeine, I was in my backyard trying to pull weeds when I saw that. Tucked behind a bush on the wall of their unit, but on my side of the property line was a small gray metal box, a fuse box. My heart literally skipped a beat. I'd never noticed it before. Part of me was curious, and another, much darker part of me took over. I walked over and tugged on the latch. It wasn't even locked. It swung open. Inside were two big black switches. Beneath them, two faded labels. One said Unit A Priorix mine, the other said Unit B theirs. I just stared. It was a kill switch, the power to plunge their world into darkness and, more importantly, silence. The idea was so simple it was genius. I could just flip it. No more begging, no more useless notes or phone calls. Just one silent move. My mind started racing. I knew this was a terrible idea. I mean, it was definitely illegal. Tampering with someone's electricity isn't a gray area. It's a crime. And it could be dangerous. What if, what if anything? But then I heard a burst of loud, obnoxious laughter from their window, and all my hesitation vanished. What were they going to do? Complain to the landlord that their neighbor, the one they'd been torturing for months, mysteriously cut their power? The beauty of it was that they couldn't prove a thing. It could have been a power surge, a faulty breaker, anything. Still, I knew I couldn't be impulsive. Doing it now, on a random Thursday, would just be an inconvenience. For this to work, it had to be a real punishment. It had to carry the weight of sweet, sweet justice. I needed to wait for the perfect moment. A moment where losing power would be absolutely catastrophic. My plan began to form, not out of malice, but out of a desperate need to get my life back. I closed the little gray box, the latch clicking softly, and I waited. They announced the perfect moment themselves, weeks in advance. I overheard them in the yard, bragging about the party they were planning. It wasn't just a party, it was the party, the Super Bowl. This was their Christmas and New Year's all rolled into one. They were talking about a giant TV they were renting, the kegs they were ordering, how many people they were going to cram into that tiny apartment. As I listened, a grim, determined smile spread across my face. It was perfect. It was poetic. Super Bowl Sunday felt like a declaration of war. The noise started before noon. Cars lined the street. The pregame was in full swing, and my walls were already vibrating. On any other day, this would have sent me into a spiral of misery. But not today. Today, I was filled with a cold, calm sense of purpose. As the afternoon went on, it got even crazier. They screamed with every play. The music from their speakers fought with the game's commentary. It felt like my duplex was located inside the stadium itself. My daughter's nap was a total lost cause. She was overtired and crying, completely drowned out by the roar from next door. I held her close and whispered, "Just a little longer, baby. Mommy's gonna make it all quiet soon." I waited until the game was deep into the second half. I wanted them invested. I wanted them on the edge of their seats, totally lost in the drama. I pictured them all packed in there, screaming, high-fiving, their entire world focused on that glowing screen. That was the moment. My daughter had finally cried herself to sleep from sheer exhaustion. I laid her gently in her crib, walked to my back door, and slipped outside. The noise was a physical assault. My heart was pounding with adrenaline, fear, and a thrilling sense of power. I walked across the grass, reached the hibiscus bush, and pulled back the leaves. There it was, my silent accomplice. My hand was shaking a little as I opened the box. Unit A and Unit B. I heard a massive roar from the apartment, a touchdown, or a big play. It didn't matter. They were at their absolute peak. I took one last deep breath. This was for every sleepless night. This was for my daughter. This was for me. My fingers closed around the cool plastic of the switch for Unit B, and with a satisfying final click, I flipped it down. The effect was instant. 1 second, my world was a storm of noise, the next, nothing. A deep, profound, beautiful silence. It was so sudden, it was almost confusing. The only sound left was the rustle of the palm trees. It was the sound of peace, the sound of victory. I just stood there for a second, soaking it in, and then I let out this giddy, triumphant laugh. I felt 100 pounds lighter. I snuck over to my window and peeked through the blinds. Their apartment was dark, except for the glow of a few cell phone screens. I saw frantic shadows moving around. A door flew open, and I heard their voices, now just normal, unamplified voices full of confusion. "What the hell? Did the power go out? Dude, the game! Turn it back on! Check the breakers inside." I almost laughed again. The breakers inside weren't going to do a thing. I had cut the power at the source. Their source. I watched as their guests started pouring out, angry and grumbling. The Super Bowl party was officially dead. No TV, no music, no lights. Within 20 minutes, the guys themselves gave up. I heard them pile into a car, yelling about finding a sports bar to catch the end of the game. Their car sped off, and they were gone. I was alone. The house was quiet. My daughter was sleeping soundly for the first time all day. I walked through my apartment, touching the walls, which were finally still. I made a cup of tea and just sat there, listening to the glorious quiet. It was one of the most satisfying moments of my entire life. I hadn't yelled, I hadn't fought, I hadn't even confronted them. I just flipped a switch. And I had won. In the days that followed, things were different. The neighbors were angry, but they had no idea what had actually happened. I heard them complaining about a power surge and griping to the landlord about the faulty wiring. The landlord sent an electrician who, of course, flipped the switch back on. The electrician noted that the breaker had been manually shut off but couldn't prove who did it. The landlord, now getting complaints from the problem tenants, sent a notice to both of us about not tampering with the building's utilities. But something had shifted. Their confidence was gone. And more importantly, my confidence was back. I had my power. While they were quiet for a few days, the noise eventually started again. But now I fought back the right way too. I documented everything, every party, every late night. I sent polite, persistent, evidence-backed emails to my landlord. My little Super Bowl stunt had given me the courage to be relentless. Maybe it was my constant documentation, or maybe the tenants complaining about the power was the final straw for the landlord. But about a month later, I saw a formal notice on their door. It was an eviction notice. The feeling of joy was indescribable. It was even better than the silence of that Sunday. This was permanent. Watching their moving truck pull away was my victory parade. It was the end of a long, stressful war. The peace that came over the duplex after they left was absolute. A quiet family moved in a few weeks later, and the loudest noise I ever heard was their toddler laughing. My home was finally the Hawaiian sanctuary I had dreamed of. I had fought for my peace, not with shouting, but with silence. And that's how I finally got my peace and quiet. Now, I have to be completely honest. What I did was super illegal, and I am not recommending it. You could get in serious trouble. But when the system fails you over and over, you can get pushed to a point you never thought you'd reach. It was petty, for sure, but after months of being miserable, it felt like justice. My only regret is that I didn't think of it sooner. So I have to ask, what would you have done? Have you ever had a nightmare neighbor that pushed you to the edge? Share your own stories in the comments below. I want to hear them. And if you like this story, do me a favor and flip the switch on that like button and subscribe. Thanks for listening. Thanks for